Hi, everybody. My name is Jacob Oliver. I am the U.S. editor at cryptobriefing.com, and welcome to our first panel discussion of the day on the subject of DeFi infrastructure. Big topic over the year 2021 and probably a big topic going into 2022. Brief introduction to our panelists today. We have Michael Godsey, the GM and head of product at Infura. Michael, welcome. We also have Mike Calvanese, CEO and co-founder of Brink Finance, who you've seen already today. Joe Butcher, Business Development Manager at BlockVision, and Brainjar, Founder and Head of Product at Composable Finance. Gentlemen, welcome to the panel. How are you doing today?
Great. Good, thanks. Great. Well.
Excellent. So I want to open it up with a broad question. So, and one that you've all seen coming. So what are the main infrastructural problems that you see with DeFi projects that we need to address most urgently? And specifically, are there, you can think of these in terms of infrastructural problems that we might see in traditional finance as well, but mainly I'm interested in what are the problems that are unique to DeFi infrastructure. Who would like to start?
I don't mind going first.
Wonderful.
I think one of the issues is deciding which infrastructure you want to build into your platform, right? Because there's so many out there. It's like an ever-evolving space. In like traditional finance, it's so easy to sort of go, oh, this is what database to use, this is what like network to use, that sort of stuff. There's like hundreds of reviews online for like any hardware, but with blockchain, the infrastructure is like so new. I think if you want to commit to a like specific infrastructure when you start to build your project, and it turns out not to perform to the requirements you need, you're going to have to spend more dev time switching over to a new infrastructure. So I think having to like adapt so quickly is kind of a unique challenge that blockchain faces.
Yeah, can you guys hear me, by the way?
Yes, sir.
Yeah, so I just wanted to echo that as well. So I mean, one of the things that we're super interested in doing with composable finance is like sort of being able to provide an interface so that developers don't really need to make a decision across different ecosystems. It is like difficult to see what that future looks like, but I do feel, you know, one of the most important problems is there's all these kind of exciting projects happening across different ecosystems and lots of exciting people also working on these things across different ecosystems. And if there was a way where cross-chain communication could get to a point where it wasn't just sort of focused on token transfers and simple kind of functions like this, but also thinking about what an actual cross-chain application would look like. Products, the possibilities sort of would kind of be endless, seeing kind of compounding of the benefits of the different chains that could be kind of aggregated almost in the back end. So I think for us, like this, you know, on a very kind of general level, like this is kind of like the, you know, near-term vision for us, kind of being able to enable infrastructure that provides, you know, cross-chain communication, but also kind of thinking about what that infrastructure actually looks like. And I feel like that's definitely becoming a very important topic, especially where, you know, as a developer, you go in and you sort of have extreme decision fatigue, kind of choosing which ecosystem you'd like to work in. So I just wanted to really echo that and say that's definitely, it's a great, I think it's a fantastic problem, but it's a to have, given that, you know, we didn't used to have this many exciting ecosystems a couple of years ago, but one that should definitely be tackled.
Yeah, I'll just say it seems like it's almost like expected that dApps these days are multi-chain. Like that's kind of becoming more and more standard. I guess it's similar to like in Web 2, like if you're building for mobile, you have to build for like iOS and Android. But now in this like new paradigm, we're building for like, you know, potentially hundreds of different chains. And I think that's the tooling around that is getting better for devs for sure. But like you have to kind of think about that when you're developing your app. Think about like how you're building for not just like one single chain, but everything. And then also if you have like some service level component, like how to manage the infrastructure between all those environments. So it's definitely like a huge challenge for devs right now.
Yeah, so I guess I come from this a little bit of a different perspective because we're like really at the core infrastructure layer. And so it's about, so I'm loving hearing kind of the feedback from the guys that are much deeper in the DeFi application building. And so, multi-chain, I think I completely agree. We've accepted that this is, the future is multi-chain. We're going to be seeing people doing really, really interesting things across chains and using bridges and things like that. And that, like, understanding the underlying data structures inside of all of these chains is definitely a challenge, and something that, like, core network infrastructure providers are going to have to overcome, because the data patterns that we've discovered on ETH might not be the same data patterns that we discover on other chains. And the way that the data lives inside of these nodes, and therefore the access patterns for building applications on top of that is going to change drastically. And that's something that we think about a lot. And I think it's going to be a big, exciting new improvement you'll see kind of on Infura and across other infrastructure providers in 2022.
Cool. Well, thank you all for that. I like to follow that up by, kind of asking about, roadmap is not exactly the right word for this, but in terms of the problems we've brought up so far, I guess I would like to get your thoughts on what is the most pressing infrastructure problem that you see as the one that needs to be taken care of before others can fall into line, if that question makes sense to you. I guess, what is at the forefront of your mind when you think of infrastructure problems? This is the thing that we need to address before other things can be addressed more adequately.
So I'm happy to take a stab at that. I have a somewhat formed answer on this one. So I think this actually plugs into what Joe was saying. It's like we're still so early on that we're heavily in the educational phase of this technology. And so, like, I think the biggest thing, and I know this is a bit of a cheap answer, but I think the biggest thing that we have to do as really just developer tools, groups, and giving people access to this technology is teaching people about it. So it's having the best libraries, it's having the best tutorials, the best documentation, and showing, and then starting to realize those patterns around different chains and building tools on top of the base specs, so that you're not having to solve the problems that 100 people have already solved before you. So I know it's a little bit of a lowball answer, but I really think education is still the number one thing that we have to work on.
Awesome. Any other thoughts on that?
Well, I mean, I kind of think the same, like education. At the developer level, yeah, obviously people can sort of hammer their way through and get there eventually. But like, I think with the like recent wave of like NFTs and so many new users, I think the large majority don't really know how to interact with the like blockchain. Mm-hmm. So I think if they're going to use these infrastructure tools we have, I think they need to be like foolproof. Basically, anyone can sort of get in and sort of start interacting with the blockchain, even with like very little tech background.
Okay, so I'm hearing education, I'm hearing user experience. What else?
Definitely like interoperability and bridging is hugely important. There's like obviously a ton of progress being made in this area, but like it's almost like hard to keep up as like new environments continue to be added, like new chains continue to be added. There's like just more and more of a need for better interoperability solutions, and I feel like from a developer perspective, it still has a lot of room for improvement. Like it's somewhat easy to like deploy across chains, but not necessarily to like communicate across chains. So I think we've seen like a ton of progress there, but that's definitely something I would say is like a priority for the future.
Yeah, I would definitely echo that. I mean, that's kind of like the entire point of like what we're working on. But it's really just because of the fact that I think the like education is also important, because I think the word cross-chain, the words multi-chain are used quite a bit, but it's really just a meme. Like every protocol going cross-chain basically just means they want to just tap into the new liquidity incentives that are getting deployed on a specific ecosystem to like, and the sort of influx of users that results from that. And so like, but there really is no kind of like native app to app communication happening, even between the same instances. And so I think like to be able to actually unlock things like user experience, like these are the things that need to get solved. Because then obviously with proper interoperability, you sort of now get like, I want to do X function. I don't really care how it happens, and you know, that's powered by like proper interoperability solutions, which we still don't have.
That's actually an excellent point to bring up right at this point, because it is the subject of my next question. As you all are fully aware, bridges are emerging as a really hot topic of conversation as these talks around interoperability are taking shape. So specifically on the subject of interoperability bridges, how do you guys see that field shaping up over the next year or so? And do you have any, very hyper-specific thoughts on what we might see happening?
Yeah, I mean, I think bridging in and of itself is like a relatively solved problem. There's like I mean, that's definitely like an overgeneralization. Like there's hundreds of bridges out there, etc. Like there's teams building bridge aggregators, etc. But actually being able to have an interface to build with bridges operating in the back end is still something that remains to be seen. And I think that's really going to be the focus of, at least from my perspective, like sort of playing in this like space day to day, like 2022 definitely is shaping up, at least for me, as a year where we're going to start to see kind of applications that are doing communications cross chain and that are basically tapping into existing bridging protocols to build new types of applications, with these bridges basically living behind the scenes. I mean, we're already seeing this with Aave's like V3, and I think a lot of other protocols will follow suit. And so I think bridges in and of themselves, like cool concepts, but what they could potentially enable as a tool, I think goes well beyond the comprehension of the current market.
Beyond the comprehension of the current market. What do we say to that, guys?
So I think completely agree with that. I think the thing that I'm most interested in, and the groups that I like have my eyes on, is some of the channels groups that are really focusing on like heavy multi-chain communications. So it's not really like a single direction, or sorry, a bi-directional bridge between one chain and another, but it's more about having a channel that like a multi-chain channel based approach to making it, you know, nearly instant to kind of move funds between different chains or assets between different chains. So I think, you know, having developer tooling that can plug directly into those is going to be really interesting. But really, I mean, there's not a ton of developer tooling around bridges right now. So even these basic bi-directional bridges, there's not a ton of developer tooling around those. And so I think getting that functionality more understood at the developer layer, and instead of kind of forcing the user to construct those exchanges themselves, the back end operation can essentially do all of that for them. So there's no barriers when you're starting to use that game and you need to have like a specific token in that game. It can all be done inside of the user experience with the right tooling.
I'd like to say I'm excited about seeing more like censorship resistant solutions for bridges as well. I know like a lot of like there's trade-offs with these obviously, but a lot of bridging solutions we're seeing are like semi-custodial or custodial. They work really well, they're fast, but there is some obvious risk there. And projects like TBTC were really cool, like bringing some, different solutions to bridging that isn't necessarily like putting those bridged funds into like the hands of a multi-sig. Kind of like goes in with the decentralized core of what we're doing here. So just want to touch upon that. Yeah.
All right, that's a fair point. Sure. Have any? Does that occur? Any other thoughts from the rest of you on that specifically? Perhaps not. That's fine. Cool. So yeah, let's moving right along. Let's take a minute to rather than continue complaining about what hasn't been done and what still needs to be done. Let's talk a minute about what has been done that you guys are particularly excited about. So, there have been a lot of developments in blockchain infrastructure over the last year, where you could extend back to, the DeFi summer of 2020. What are some of those innovations that you personally got excited about that seem to signal the field moving forward? Are there any of these problems that we've talked about that are really already being addressed? And are you seeing any interesting projects that are taking up the mantle and moving forward with what we're trying to accomplish here? It's really two questions.
I'm happy to hop in on this. So I think, oh man, I'm going to give a shout out to a company that probably isn't expecting this, but so I actually think the Graph is doing some really incredible work, making especially DeFi specifically extremely accessible to developers. And I think that what they're proving is that there is a high demand for processed data and easier interfaces into this data. And so I think we've started to see, GraphQL is like a really cool, not so new, but it's a newer interface that people are building applications around, and there's pros and cons to it, and it has its use cases in certain areas and isn't exactly super useful in other areas, but what it's teaching people is that there's ways to structure this data in really intelligent and fast access ways, and it's making it infinitely more efficient for people to interact with these chains. And so I think they're doing a really particularly great job at that and kind of blazing the path for a lot of us. And I think that the only other thing, and I'll shamelessly plug one of our features, is we have a feature called ITX that is that's starting to look at the structure of transactions and removing the complexity of transactions, because you really have read and write into these chains. And so there's a ton of innovation being done on the read aspect with libraries and interfaces and indexers and stuff like that. And then relaying and transaction relaying and some of the functionality that tools like ITX do is removing some of the complexity, but also adding entirely new design patterns for developers to make it even easier for the user experience of people actually interacting with Web3 apps.
Awesome. And I suppose I should have clarified that question by saying that you are allowed to mention your own projects if they fit the description. Joe, you got something?
Yeah, didn't want to like shamelessly just jump in and plug my own thing, but yeah, Block Vision. So
You got something.
Yeah, we're all about data storage, data analysis, APIs, like analyzing huge sets of data. We think there's going to be massive need for that over the next couple of years. We want to be sort of like at the forefront of that. So yeah, all that space we're super excited about. On a tangent, there's other infrastructure over the past year, not related to my stuff. The EU announced their own blockchain services, aiming to provide cross-border access for its citizens, stuff like creating their own ID and moving between countries. So I think that's kind of exciting, where like governments are actually getting involved with blockchain and sort of putting something as important as users' identification on chain. So I think that's a huge signal for the future as well, where that space is heading.
Cool. Mike, did you want to jump in?
Sure. Yeah. We're talking about like big things that happened in the last year, like L2 deployments. We have live L2s on Ethereum now, which is amazing. Optimism, Arbitrum, Polygon, like these things didn't exist not long ago. Like they were all in development. Now they're live. We can deploy on them. We can use them. Super excited about that. Yeah.
Yeah, that's a big one. And Brainjar, you were about to hop in as well.
Yeah, no, I mean, I think for us, like we're, again, like our core focus really is doing kind of like some of the things that have been mentioned, which is sort of finding ways to spawn kind of the creation of cross-chain applications, building on, and having bridges and other sort of interoperability solutions in the back end to facilitate these like more optimized user experiences. So I think for us, like it's definitely it was, for sure kind of like an uphill battle, especially with in the first half of the year, kind of L2s getting delayed. But of course, it's a huge achievement now that we actually have them, and there's like lots of really cool stuff happening across these different ecosystems. I think Polygon has also emerged as like a huge kind of like thought leader on this space, sort of like with the massive portfolio that they've put together of scaling solutions. But yeah, I think sort of now the tide is turning where I think, solutions like ours that allow people to build these cross-chain applications that can do things like arbitrage and yield chasing and sort of like on a more primitive level, and then on a more sort of complicated level, sort of being able to deploy different parts of an application across different ecosystems. I think that is really sort of, it's exciting to see these types of things getting more and more adopted by the developer community. I feel like there's definitely been a mindset shift, especially in the past kind of like few months.
Yeah. Awesome. This is great. I want to maybe hit you guys with a slightly harder question as we go into our last few minutes here. And it's on the subject of DAOs. Like we're all familiar with DAOs. We have sort of put forward this idea of the decentralized autonomous organization as, kind of a paradigm of democratic governance and fairness and so on. But as we all know, like a decentralized governance model can falter a bit in certain situations, such as when, it's time to make a quick and decisive decision about something. I guess, particularly in DeFi protocols and infrastructure that are primarily governed by these decentralized organizations, how do you think about the core tension between a decentralized governance model and, quick, efficient decision making? Have you given thought to that recently?
I can jump in.
Cool.
I think there's a lot of like security concerns. Obviously, like the Badger DAO hack recently, but I think the benefits sort of outweigh the risks. If you look at something like the MT Gox hack back in whenever that was, 2011 maybe, so much money was lost, but no one really bats an eyelid nowadays if they're sending money to an exchange, right? I think we just need to sort of like learn from the mistakes in the past, fix these security issues going forward, and then sort of build a better platform for these DAOs to sort of expand, I guess.
Okay.
I know a lot of people have controversial takes on this. I feel like a lot of the industry is like using DAOs as like interchangeable with companies, which is a little dangerous right now. Not necessarily dangerous, but it's not like a one size fits all kind of thing. Like you can't just replace any company with a DAO. And I think like with certain things like DAOs seem to have been doing a pretty good job of, like in some cases like treasury management and like proposal based like funding allocations. I think there's been some use cases for that with DAOs that have worked well. But like DAOs managing like a software project, a lot of attempts at that right now. I don't think it's always going so well. That's something where you need to make like very quick decisions. So yeah, I think I'm obviously like bullish on DAOs. I'm super stoked on DAOs, but like I don't think it's a one size fits all solution to like every coordination problem.
Thank you. Michael or Brainjar, do you have any thoughts on DAOs and governance models?
Yeah, I mean, I kind of echo those perspectives. I think one of the things that is exciting about a DAO is like anybody in the world can basically just jump into a Discord and start working for a DAO. But I think like if we're going to actually get more participants voting and participating in decisions in the DAO, there needs to be like propagation. There needs to basically be like DAOs can't just all live on L1. And I think it's like really actually like philosophically quite toxic where a lot of DAOs are based on L1. The voters are mainnet users, and they're basically governing different instances of a protocol, and the user bases across mainnet, across Polygon, across Arbitrum, etc., are all ridiculously different. And you sort of now have like mainnet users kind of governing users on other chains and ecosystems, which I think is like, yeah, really toxic. It's not really something that people like talk about per se, because it might not necessarily be a problem now, but I do foresee there being a lot more increased participation like globally in DAOs if there was a solution to this problem. Anyway, just like my 2 cents.
Yeah, I guess my general sense on it is that governance is really hard. And I think if we're trying to simplify it down to, oh, we can solve all the complicated things of governance with a token, I think that's being a bit naive. And I'm not saying that people are doing that, but I think like where I see DAOs right now is that like it's people taking the interesting new mechanics that this technology allows and experimenting with how this can be applied to the patterns of networks and coordination with people and governance and things like that. And so it's one of the many experiments that people are doing. And so it's proving it's going to take time where it goes, okay, it doesn't work for this, it does work for this. And as long as people are smart about running those experimentations and being honest about where things fail and where things succeed, I think it'll be a really, really cool mechanic that people can take advantage of. And I just think that people have been studying governance for a long time, and I just hope that, you know, like, this attracts some of the kind of the leading thinkers in those types of disciplines into thinking about how this can be applied using this technology. Very
cool. All right, we've got about 3 minutes left. I want to follow that one up with an easy one. What are you excited about going into 2022? Infrastructure related, that is. We'll keep it on point. But as we go into the next year, what is it that what's really caught your attention as something that we should be looking out for?
So mine for this is a super easy one. The ETH merge to proof of stake. So to me, this is next year is going to be the year where developers are starting to interact with Ethereum when it's using a new consensus algorithm. And that, to me, the new patterns of how, like, developers are going to interact with the execution layer versus the consensus layer, and having those separate, and the improvements that we're going to see with potentially peering of the pending transaction pool and stuff like that. I think that it's going to be a really exciting year seeing how all that unfolds.
Yeah, that's a big one for sure. Sorry if you stole anyone else's answer.
Yeah, I think generally speaking, this concept of, like, data availability is becoming, I think, super, like, there's obviously that EIP that Vitalik is pushing to allow for rollups to become even more scalable than they currently are. I think the general notion of L1s becoming data availability layers can be generalized, and that, could be the way in which a solution to generalized cross-chain communication could be forged. Time will sort of tell. I think also, like, there's a lot of really exciting stuff happening in the IBC enabled ecosystem as well. So yeah, I think there's definitely, these types of ideas are starting to converge on a single solution. And yeah, I think 2022, we will see that sort of manifestation of that solution.
Awesome. Mike,
I'll use it as a bit of a plug for what we're doing, but obviously I'm excited about where transaction automation is going. We're not the only ones working on transaction automation. There's also, like, Gelato and Autonomy. And there have been, like, kind of like protocol level, like, Keeper automation, like Keeper DAO. But Brink, Gelato, and Autonomy are working on more of, like, the account level transaction automation, which I do think is going to be a hugely growing space in the next couple of years. Obviously, that's what we're working on. So very excited about that.
Awesome. And Joe, last chance.
Yeah, I mean, obviously I could plug my stuff. We're excited about what we're doing. Also sort of excited about the competition with other similar products out there. Obviously, if we build something users think is great, that's only going to inspire other projects to sort of rise to the same level and probably even surpass. And then it's going to be sort of like a race to the top, who can build the best experience and platform for the users. So yeah, if there's a whole new wave of users coming in and a whole new sort of system that needs designing, yeah, I'm excited to see where that goes.
Awesome. Wonderful. Well, thank you, gentlemen, very much for joining us today. I want to thank everyone who tuned in. This has been our DeFi infrastructure panel 1. Michael Godsey, Mike Calvanese, Joseph Butcher, and Brain Jar, everybody. Thank you all so much for being here, and take care. I'll see you all around.
Thanks, Jacob.
Thanks, guys.
Thank you.
Bye-bye, everyone.